the quiet moments of our lives, when the world feels like it's crashing down, where do you turn for strength? What if I told you the greatest source of resilience and strength has been hidden in plain sight for centuries? And what if I told you it's not just about finding the strength within, but about trusting in a power far greater than ourselves, one that Jesus revealed long ago? Why does it seem like the more we struggle, the weaker we feel? And why, in the midst of our deepest challenges, do we sometimes forget that there's a divine source of strength we can tap into at any moment? Could it be that, for so long, we've been looking in the wrong places for peace, resilience, and healing? In this video, we are going to explore 6 powerful secrets that Jesus taught us, secrets that can help us become resilient in any situation. Through Jesus' own life, we'll see how trust in God, prayer, serving others, forgiveness, faith in the darkest of times, and accepting God's will provide us with the strength we need to not only survive, but thrive. By the end, you'll understand why these teachings hold the key to true spiritual and emotional resilience, and how you can begin applying them to your life today. So stay with me as we uncover the hidden truths that have the power to change everything for you. And as we dive deeper, remember to comment below with your thoughts. Let's start a conversation on how we can strengthen our trust in God and embrace these divine teachings in our daily lives. Don't forget to like and subscribe as we continue to explore these life-changing principles together. Trust in God in all circumstances. In the quiet moments of our lives, when the weight of the world presses upon us, we often find ourselves asking, "Why do I feel so weak?" The truth is, in these moments of weakness, we often forget where true strength comes from. Jesus, through his life, taught us that strength does not come from our own abilities or understanding. It comes from trusting God, especially in the most difficult moments. This trust, the kind that goes beyond circumstances and worldly wisdom, is the very foundation of resilience. Take, for example, the time when Jesus was led into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. After fasting for 40 days and nights, he was physically weak, hungry, and vulnerable. The devil saw an opportunity and tempted Jesus, suggesting he turn stones into bread. Yet in this moment of extreme vulnerability, Jesus didn't rely on his own power or the material world to satisfy his needs. He replied, "Man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." Matthew 4:4. Jesus showed us in this simple but profound response that trust in God is not just for the good times, it's for the hard times. Trusting in God isn't about understanding every step of the journey, but about believing that he is with us, guiding us, and providing for us, even when we can't see the way forward. In our own lives, when we face trials, it's easy to let doubt creep in. We often feel like we're alone in our struggles. But Jesus shows us that in those moments of vulnerability, when everything feels uncertain, that's when our trust in God should be at its strongest. It's not about relying on our own understanding or abilities. It's about surrendering control and saying, "God, I trust you in this moment." This is where true strength comes from, the strength that allows us to face storms, literal or figurative, with the peace that only comes from knowing God is in control. Another powerful example of trusting in God comes from the life of King David. When David faced Goliath, he didn't rely on his physical strength or weapons. He trusted in God to fight the battle for him. In 1 Samuel 17:45, David declared, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." David's trust in God wasn't just about belief, it was about action. He faced the giant not with fear, but with confidence in the power of God. And with that trust, he triumphed. When we face our own giants, whether they are financial struggles, health challenges, or emotional turmoil, we often feel like we're standing alone. But like David, we can trust that we don't face our battles alone. God is with us, and when we place our trust in Him, He will give us the strength we need to face whatever comes our way. Trusting in God doesn't always mean that the storm will immediately stop, but it does mean that we can find peace in the midst of the storm. Isaiah 40:31 reminds us, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." When we place our trust in God, He renews our strength. Even when we feel weary, He gives us the resilience to keep moving forward. This kind of trust isn't just about hoping for things to get better. It's about believing that, no matter what, God has a purpose in our pain and a plan for our future. The lesson here is clear. When you face difficulties, don't rely on your own understanding or strength. Trust in God, even when you can't see the way forward. Trust that He will provide the strength you need to overcome, and that He is with you every step of the way. In those moments when you feel weakest, that's when God's strength is made perfect in you. And as you place your trust in Him, you will find the resilience to rise above whatever challenges you face. Pray constantly. Have you ever felt like you were fighting a battle alone, like you were surrounded by chaos, but there was no one to turn to for help? Jesus teaches us that in those very moments, prayer is our lifeline. Prayer is not just a religious duty. It's our direct connection to God, our source of strength, peace, and guidance. And Jesus didn't just teach us to pray. He lived it out, showing us the power of persistent, heartfelt prayer. One of the most powerful examples of Jesus' commitment to prayer comes from the night before His crucifixion in the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus knew the suffering that awaited Him, and He prayed in anguish, asking God, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." Matthew 26:38. He prayed not once, but 3 times, asking God to take the cup of suffering away from Him, but ultimately surrendering to God's will, saying, "Not as I will, but as you will." Matthew 26:39. In this moment, Jesus demonstrates the importance of persistent prayer, not just when things are going well, but especially when we are in distress. Prayer for Jesus wasn't just a request for something to be changed. It was an opportunity to align His will with the Father's. This teaches us that prayer isn't just about asking for what we want. It's about submitting ourselves to God's will. It's about acknowledging that, while we may not understand why we're going through a particular trial, we trust that God has a purpose in it, and we surrender our own desires to His greater plan. Jesus' example in Gethsemane shows us that prayer is not just about seeking relief from pain. It's about seeking strength to endure, wisdom to understand, and peace to accept whatever God's will may be. When we pray, we open our hearts to God's presence, allowing Him to renew us and give us the courage to face whatever comes our way. And just like Jesus, we can pray not just for deliverance from our troubles, but for the strength to endure them, trusting that God will provide exactly what we need. In our own lives, we often try to handle everything ourselves, thinking that we can fix our problems on our own. But Jesus shows us that prayer is where we find the strength to persevere. Prayer is not a one-time event. It's a continuous conversation with God. It's about seeking His guidance and trusting that He is working in us, even when we don't see the results immediately. Just as Jesus withdrew to pray, we too must make prayer a regular part of our lives, especially in times of trouble. The Apostle Paul reminds us in 1 Thessalonians 5:17, "Pray without ceasing." This doesn't mean that we must be in constant prayer at all times, but that we should have an ongoing attitude of prayer, constantly seeking God's guidance and presence in our lives. When we pray, we invite God into our hearts and minds, allowing Him to strengthen us, guide us, and give us peace. The lesson here is simple. Prayer is not just about asking for things. It's about building a relationship with God. Through persistent prayer, we connect with God, find strength in His presence, and receive the peace that comes from knowing He is with us. When we face life's trials, prayer is the weapon that keeps us grounded in faith and helps us endure. So make prayer a constant part of your life, especially when you face difficult moments. Through prayer, you will find the strength, peace, and resilience to overcome anything. As we reflect on these teachings, remember that trust in God and prayer are not just abstract concepts. They are the foundations of true resilience. When we trust God with our lives and seek His guidance through constant prayer, we become empowered to face the challenges of life with peace, strength, and unwavering faith. And as we continue to walk this path, we will discover that the greatest source of strength lies not within ourselves, but in our relationship with God. Serve others. There's a unique power that comes from serving others, something that transcends any challenge or difficulty we may face in our own lives. Jesus didn't just talk about serving others. He embodied it in every aspect of His life. His actions speak volumes, showing us that serving is not just an act of kindness, but a profound source of strength. Consider the moment when Jesus, the Son of God, humbled Himself by washing the feet of His disciples. In John 13, 1-17, we witness this powerful scene during the Last Supper. The disciples, who were ready to argue about who among them was the greatest, were shocked when Jesus, their Lord, took on the role of a servant. He washed their feet, an act reserved for the lowest of servants in society. This wasn't just a symbolic gesture, it was a teaching. Jesus was showing them that true greatness comes not from being served, but from serving others. When Jesus finished washing their feet, He said to them, "Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet." John 13:14. This wasn't a request, it was a command. Jesus was demonstrating that in order to grow spiritually and emotionally, we must serve those around us. Serving isn't just about doing something for someone else. It's about shifting our focus away from our own troubles and investing in the well-being of others. It is through this act of selflessness that we find a wellspring of strength that we would never have accessed otherwise. When we are facing personal struggles or challenges, it can be easy to become self-absorbed, to focus on our pain, our difficulties, and our own needs. But Jesus' example teaches us that when we take the time to serve others, our perspective shifts. Serving others helps us to see beyond our own circumstances and find purpose in our pain. This is not just a spiritual concept, it's a practical truth. When we focus on the needs of others, we tap into a deeper reservoir of strength that we wouldn't find if we only focused on ourselves. One powerful example of this is the story of the Good Samaritan, found in Luke 10:25-37. Jesus told this parable to teach us about loving our neighbors, regardless of their background or status. In the story, a man is beaten and left for dead on the side of the road. A priest and a Levite both pass by, ignoring the man's suffering, but a Samaritan, a man who would have been considered an outsider by the Jewish community, stops and helps him, providing for his immediate needs and ensuring that he receives care. This parable highlights the transformative power of serving others, even when it is inconvenient or when we might not receive anything in return. The Samaritan's actions demonstrated compassion, empathy, and selflessness. His service was not just a physical act, it was an expression of love and humanity. Jesus used this story to remind us that true strength lies in the willingness to serve others, even when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient. When we serve, we are not only helping others, we are healing ourselves, building resilience, and developing a heart that is more attuned to God's love and purpose. Serving others also has the power to shift our focus from material success to eternal significance. When we serve selflessly, we are aligning our actions with God's will, and in doing so, we are fulfilling a greater purpose. Galatians chapter 6, 9-10 reminds us, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers." Serving others is not just a good deed. It's an investment in the kingdom of God, one that will bear fruit in our lives and in the lives of those we serve. The lesson here is clear. Serving others is not a sign of weakness, but a source of deep spiritual and emotional strength. When we shift our focus from our own needs to the needs of those around us, we unlock a well of resilience that can help us face even the most difficult trials. Serving others helps us build humility, compassion, and empathy, all of which strengthen our spirit and allow us to endure life's challenges with grace. As you go through your day, remember that the greatest strength comes not from what we take, but from what we give. Have faith in difficult times. Faith is the anchor that holds us steady in the stormy seas of life. It is not the absence of struggle, but the trust in God's ability to bring us through the struggle. Jesus, in his ministry, consistently taught us that faith is the key to overcoming adversity, and his life provides us with countless examples of how faith, even in the midst of the greatest challenges, gives us the strength to persevere. One such moment occurred when Jesus and his disciples were crossing the Sea of Galilee. As they sailed, a violent storm suddenly arose, and the waves began to overwhelm the boat. The disciples, terrified for their lives, woke Jesus, who was asleep in the stern. They cried out, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Mark 4:38. Jesus, with unwavering calm, stood and rebuked the storm, saying, "Quiet, be still." And immediately the storm subsided. In that moment, Jesus turned to his disciples and asked, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" Mark chapter 4:40. Jesus wasn't merely addressing their fear of the storm. He was pointing out their lack of faith in God's ability to protect and guide them, even in the most chaotic of circumstances. The storm was a powerful reminder of how faith, in the face of overwhelming fear, allows us to remain grounded in God's promises. In our own lives, we often face storms of our own, whether in our relationships, our health, our finances, or our emotional well-being. In these times, it is easy to give in to fear and doubt. But Jesus teaches us that faith in God is the key to overcoming these challenges. When we trust in God's power, we can face any storm with peace in our hearts, knowing that He is in control. Another powerful story of faith comes from the woman with the issue of blood, found in Mark 5:25-34. This woman had suffered for 12 years, spending all she had on treatments, but no one could help her. Yet, when she heard about Jesus, she believed that if she could just touch his clothes, she would be healed. And so, in faith, she reached out and touched his garment. Immediately, she was healed, and Jesus, knowing that power had gone out from him, turned and said, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." Mark 5:34. This woman's faith was simple but powerful. She didn't have to fully understand how Jesus could heal her. She simply believed that he could, and her faith moved Jesus to act. This story teaches us that even in our most desperate moments, faith in God's power can bring healing and restoration. It is through faith that we find strength in times of weakness, hope in times of despair, and peace in times of chaos. The lesson from both the storm on the Sea of Galilee and the woman with the issue of blood is that faith in God is the foundation of resilience. It is not the absence of difficulty that gives us strength. It is the confidence that God is with us, even in the midst of our struggles. When we place our trust in God, we are able to endure hardships with hope, knowing that He will bring us through. Our faith is not in our own ability to overcome, but in God's ability to work in and through us, no matter the circumstances. As we navigate the storms of life, remember that faith is the key to resilience. It is through faith that we are able to rise above fear and doubt and face the challenges of life with courage and peace. Trust that God is with you, that He will provide the strength you need, and that just like the woman with the issue of blood, your faith can bring healing and transformation. Forgive wholeheartedly. Forgiveness is not just a word we say. It is an act of healing, a deep spiritual practice that liberates us from the chains of anger, bitterness, and resentment. Jesus, in His life and teachings, made it clear that forgiveness is not optional. It is essential for spiritual growth and emotional healing. But more than that, forgiveness is a source of inner strength. It is an act that not only restores relationships, but also renews the soul. One of the most profound moments of forgiveness in Jesus' life came while He was on the cross. As He hung there in excruciating pain, with His life slowly slipping away, He looked at the very people who had mocked Him, beaten Him, and nailed Him to the cross. And what did He say? "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Luke 23:34. This wasn't just a plea for mercy. It was an example of true strength, the kind of strength that comes from letting go of the need for revenge or justice and entrusting everything to God. In that moment, Jesus showed us that forgiveness is not about forgetting or excusing the hurt. It's not about saying what happened is okay when it clearly wasn't. Forgiveness is about releasing ourselves from the grip of anger and bitterness and trusting that God's justice will prevail. It's about choosing to let go of the past so that we can move forward with peace in our hearts. This is the kind of forgiveness that transforms us. It frees us from the burden of resentment and opens up space for God's healing to flow in. Forgiveness, as Jesus demonstrated, is not a sign of weakness. It is an incredible act of strength. It takes great courage to forgive, especially when we have been deeply wounded. But when we choose to forgive, we choose freedom. We choose to take control of our hearts rather than letting the pain of the past control us. And in that freedom we find healing, not just for the person who wronged us, but for ourselves as well. Forgiving wholeheartedly doesn't mean that the hurt disappears. It doesn't mean we instantly feel better or that the pain goes away. What it does mean is that we choose to surrender our pain to God, trusting that He will bring healing in His time. It means choosing peace over anger, love over hate, and freedom over bondage. Jesus' words on the cross serve as a powerful reminder that forgiveness is not for the other person, it is for us. It's for our own healing and restoration. In Matthew 18:21-22, when Peter asked Jesus how many times he should forgive, suggesting 7 times as a generous amount, Jesus answered, "I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times." This was not meant to be a literal number, but an invitation to forgive without limits, to forgive not just once or twice, but continuously. Forgiveness is a practice that requires constant attention and intentionality. It's a process, not a one-time event. And each time we choose to forgive, we grow stronger, more compassionate, and more like Christ. The lesson here is simple but profound. Forgiveness is not a one-time act. It is a continuous choice to let go of the pain and embrace God's healing. When we forgive, we release ourselves from the grip of resentment and allow God to restore our hearts. Just as Jesus forgave those who wronged Him, we are called to forgive others, not because they deserve it, but because it is through forgiveness that we find true peace and strength. So take a moment today to reflect on any unforgiveness in your heart and ask God to help you release it so that His healing can begin. Accept God's will. Acceptance of God's will is one of the most powerful yet challenging aspects of faith. We often want to control our lives, make our own decisions, and ensure that everything unfolds the way we desire. But Jesus, in His life and His ministry, showed us that true resilience and strength come from surrendering our will to God and trusting that His plan is greater than our own. The Garden of Gethsemane is one of the most significant examples of Jesus' surrender to God's will. As he prayed before his arrest, knowing the immense suffering that awaited him, he said, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will but yours be done." Luke 22:42. Jesus knew the pain and the sacrifice that lay ahead, yet he chose to submit to God's will, fully trusting that God's plan was the best plan, even though it involved unimaginable suffering. In this moment, Jesus demonstrated that true strength is found not in resisting God's will, but in submitting to it. Acceptance of God's will doesn't mean we won't face pain, loss, or hardship. In fact, it often means we will face challenges that we may not understand or desire. But what it does mean is that we trust that God's ways are higher and wiser than our own, and that He is working in all things for our good. We see a similar example in the story of Abraham, when God asked him to sacrifice his son Isaac. Abraham had waited many years for a son, and Isaac was the fulfillment of God's promise to him. Yet, when God asked him to sacrifice Isaac, Abraham didn't question God's will. Instead, he trusted that God's plan was greater than his own understanding. And in the end, God provided a ram for the sacrifice, showing that His plan was always for Abraham's good. Genesis 22:1-19. Accepting God's will is not always easy. It requires a deep trust that God's plans for us are better than the plans we make for ourselves. But when we surrender our will to God, we find a peace that surpasses understanding. We stop fighting against our circumstances and start trusting that God is in control, even when things don't go the way we hoped. Proverbs 16:9 says, "In their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." This verse reminds us that while we may have our own ideas about how life should unfold, ultimately, it is God who directs our steps. And His plans, though often different from ours, are always for our good and His glory. The lesson here is that accepting God's will is not passive. It is an active choice to trust in God's sovereignty and wisdom. When we surrender our desires, plans, and expectations to God, we open ourselves up to His perfect will, knowing that He is guiding us towards something far greater than we could ever imagine. In times of uncertainty or hardship, remember that God's plan is always greater than our own. Trust that He is in control, and in that trust, you will find the strength and resilience to face whatever challenges come your way. As we reflect on Jesus' life and teachings, we see that true resilience comes from trusting in God's plan, accepting His will, and allowing His strength to work through us. When we trust in God, pray constantly, serve others, forgive wholeheartedly, and accept His will, we find a peace and strength that transcends our understanding and allows us to face life's challenges with courage, grace, and unwavering faith. As we reach the end of this video, I want to remind you of one profound truth that stands tall in the teachings of Jesus. True strength, resilience, and peace come not from what we can do alone, but from the faith we place in God. We often find ourselves caught in the whirlwind of life, facing challenges that seem too much to bear. Yet, it is in these very moments that the teachings of Christ shine their brightest. He taught us how to trust in God's sovereignty, to pray without ceasing, to forgive with open hearts, and to serve others in humility. These aren't just lessons, they are lifelines. They are the divine tools that, when embraced, transform our weaknesses into powerful testimonies of God's grace. Jesus didn't promise an easy road, but He did promise that He would be with us through every storm, guiding us with His unwavering love. And in that love, we find the strength to face anything, whether it's the giant struggles in our lives or the small daily obstacles. The power of forgiveness, the peace of prayer, the resilience built on trusting in God's plan, all of these shape us into people who can stand strong, not because of our own might, but because of the unwavering strength that comes from God's hand. When we choose to forgive, we choose freedom. When we choose to pray, we choose connection to the divine. And when we choose to trust God's will, we choose peace. Peace that surpasses all understanding, a peace that holds us together when the world tries to tear us apart. These lessons are not just words on a page. They are the heart of what it means to live in alignment with God's purpose for our lives. Now, as you reflect on the message you've just heard, I ask you to think about how you can apply these truths in your life. What is one thing you can do today to trust God more deeply? How can you serve others with more love and humility? Where do you need to forgive, not for the sake of others, but for the sake of your own peace? It's in the small steps, the everyday choices, that we begin to walk in the strength that God offers us. If this video has touched your heart, if it has helped you find a bit of light in the darkness, I invite you to support this journey. Your encouragement, your comments, your likes, these are all invaluable to me as I continue to share these messages. Every time you engage with this content, it not only lifts me, but also spreads these life-giving words to others who may need them. We're creating a community of strength, healing, and faith. And together, we can continue to walk this path, finding peace, resilience, and strength in God's grace. So, if you feel moved by what you've heard today, if you feel this message has brought you closer to the heart of God, I kindly ask you to show your support. Your engagement, whether through a comment, a like, or subscribing to this channel, helps this message reach those who need it most. It's not just about growing numbers. It's about growing hearts together. Every small contribution means the world to me, and I thank you from the very bottom of my heart for being part of this journey. Your support, your presence here, is a gift that fuels this mission and allows it to continue, one video at a time. In times of difficulty, when we face the storms of life, remember that you are not alone. Trust in God's plan. Pray without ceasing. Serve others with love. Forgive with grace, and accept His will for your life. These are the keys that will unlock your true strength, resilience, and peace. God's promises are true, and His love is unchanging. So, lean into Him, knowing that He is your strength, your refuge, and your help in times of need. Thank you, from the deepest part of my heart, for being here. Together, we are stronger, and together, we will continue to walk in the light of God's love, trust, and grace.